And then that is my introduction. So if you guys don't mind, maybe just give me kind of your background. I know Chris reached out to you directly, so maybe just kind of talk to me a little bit about your experience and sure we can and all that stuff.
Sure. Well, my name's Ryan Castalia. I'm the executive director of Sure We Can. I've worked here since 2018, but the organization was founded in 2007. The Sure We Can was founded by recyclers, by canners, who at the time were experiencing homelessness, and they founded it with the aim of providing a type of service that was really lacking at the time, which didn't just redeem their recyclables for cash, though that was a key part of it, but also uh, approached that work in a way that brought dignity, respect, conscientious like treatment, fairness, transparency to a sector that really was lacking a lot of that at the time. I mean, it still does, but
Mhm.
even more so at the time. Um, so we've we're a canner sensitive redemption center, or like that's. I apologize. I'm a little ill, so my brain isn't firing at its normal pace.
That's
So
okay.
I'm
That's
sorry
why
if
I'm off camera today, so we're very much on the same page.
okay. Well, I'm sorry
Um,
if I don't make sense. Just stop me. So the idea was to really provide a safe space for canners to earn income and also to form community, to be people. Um, so we've followed that mission for the last 15, 16 years. And lately that it's kind of taken interesting new strides in terms of we've offered redemption service throughout that period, but in the past few years, especially in the context of the pandemic, we've been able to really build out the supportive, community sensitive side of our work in multiple ways. We got really involved in pandemic outreach. We helped canners be recognized in the US Census in 2020. Um, and, something that Christine's really been a strong leader in is we've taken really notable strides in organizing New York City canners to have a context where they can advocate directly for their own interests rather than being represented by an organization like Sure We Can. So just this past summer and autumn, we actually were able to what's the right word like institute formalize this sort of semi-autonomous what we hope to be essentially a union of canners here in New York City, now called the Alliance of Independent Recyclers, and they have now their own elected officers and their own meeting system, and hopefully it's a context that can expand beyond just canners who come to Sure We Can, but really to include all canners in New York City, and again create this environment where they can advocate to institutions, to redemption centers, even to Sure We Can as an autonomous group rather than a sort of subordinate one.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. You're giving them the tools to empower themselves. So I think that
That's the idea.
yeah. Um, so from a
And
structural
Christine,
standpoint,
you want to share a little bit about your?
Yeah, I'll just say I've been involved with Sure We Can since late 2018. Um, I just came in as a volunteer. I'm also an anthropologist. And so one of the hats that I wear is helping to lead and implement research projects.
Mm.
And this past summer, we did the first ever canner study in New York City, encompassing all 5 boroughs to try to understand the population of people who are redeeming cans and bottles as a livelihood. And we're coming out with that report in the next, like a version of it in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
awesome.
So we're happy to send you that. Um, I imagine that New Jersey, at the point at which you are able to get a bottle bill passed, that things will be very different in suburban and rural areas versus urban areas. And so
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, that's going to be something to kind of be keyed into in New York City. Most people don't redeem their own cans and bottles because it's logistically challenging.
Yeah.
And so it does fall on folks willing to do it as a livelihood, to pull things out of the trash and recycling. Um, and and therefore, in the urban context in particular, we have been really advocating for nonprofit redemption centers that can be attentive to and try to meet the other needs that these workers are also have, that are unmet in other ways.
Totally.
So yeah, and just yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I just want to mention that ties into what I didn't mention, but I guess it's sort of for granted given the context of our conversation that we're really deeply involved in advocating here in New York for expansion of the bottle bill, and other legislative objectives around recognizing canners as essential workers and making sure that their rights and safety are supported. So we work with Beyond Plastics and the New York Public Interest Research Group to help lead a coalition of environmental justice organizations across the state to achieve those legislative objectives as well.
And also redemption center owners.
Oh, yes,
So
of
even
course,
in the
and
private
redemption
sector,
centers,
yeah,
yes.
they have a real stake in wanting to pass a better bottle bill.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. Thank you guys so much for clarifying a lot of that. And you brought up a really good point. And normally, the structure of like the interviews has been from like the Beyond Plastic standpoint, it's kind of just, okay, like how do we encourage people to participate, in the system? And I feel like you guys have a different take on that because you brought up a really important point where you're coming from an urban background and New Jersey doesn't really have the infrastructure for that. So I think one of the challenges that Brooke and Chris are kind of running into is once the money, is going back into the state, like where is the state investing that? And are they investing it into like education and incentivizing and things like that for people of New Jersey? Because there is definitely a convenience factor, right? I live in the beach in New Jersey and I work in New York City and I don't have a car. So, to get to the closest grocery store for me is about a 9-minute walk, which is great, but not everybody has that luxury. So I guess I'm going to change the script a little bit for you guys. And what are maybe like the incentives that you guys are working with through either Beyond Plastic or whoever else? Like what's kind of the incentives on maybe both state and economically that you're using to form maybe more redemption centers, more access to them, things like that?
That's a good question. I mean, this is actually a huge piece of our advocacy in the sense that though right now we do have a bottle bill, and as it stands, there's a pretty sizable fund of money from unredeemed deposits that does go to the state.
Yeah.
Like, not a single cent of that essentially is reinvested into the system in the form of education, supporting redemption centers, or anything.
Yeah.
So even though we have the system, we don't have that function that you're describing as being critical, which we agree it is critical.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a somewhat of an open question, I would say, in our coalition of how exactly this can be structured. I mean, we have our kind of horse in the race in the sense that, like you're saying, we want to see more redemption centers. So we think funds could be directly allocated from unredeemed deposits to support. So, for example, there are lots of canners who have many years of experience doing this work, and often on a really highly organized and high volume level, who would be eager to start their own redemption centers,
Yeah.
yet don't have the resources or support to do so. So we would love to see investments being made directly by the state to support budding entrepreneurs like that to start their own centers, especially in places like Manhattan where there are no redemption centers at all, just because it's too expensive to operate. So the state could ameliorate that issue by those types of investments. As well as, I mean, I think the types of education campaigns you're describing are super important. I mean, that's an issue we face, is that canners and the system really at large is kind of invisibilized or also subordinated in the sense that, like, the municipal recycling system here is financially invested in the inefficiency of the redemption system, because the more that the redemption system doesn't capture, but it instead goes to the curb and goes to the corporation that receives all the recycling from DSNY, they just straight up they earn more money.
Yeah.
So education campaigns from the city saying just like the bottle bill is good, canners do good work, you should
redeem
redeem
your
your
cans
material. Like, yeah, it's like
yeah,
just participate.
all missing.
It's none of that's there, and it's so needed. So there's like you're already pointing out, there's just a variety of ways those advancements can take form, but I think all of them are important, and there is at least here in New York, there's at least $100 million a year. There would be more if the deposit were to go up to do that kind of work, but none of that money is being used for that purpose right now.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And just so I heard you correctly, you said Manhattan currently does not offer any redemption centers?
They have RVM sites, so just
Okay.
reverse vending machines
Yep.
at grocery stores,
Okay, got
but
it.
not redemption centers in the way that we are. Like a big site where you can return bulk.
Okay.
And part of the issue is that so there are redemption access points in that sense, but not
Yeah.
redemption centers. And for canners who earn their livelihoods in this work, a place that can receive a high volume of material efficiently is crucial for their workflow. I mean, it's just not possible to redeem 2,000. Like, you want to earn $100 in a day canning, you got to collect 2,000 cans here in New York City.
Yeah.
So to return those via a reverse vending machine just isn't feasible.
You'd have to go to like 7 different sites because each site is only required to accept the equivalent of $12 worth of materials. So that's something to keep in mind as you're crafting the New Jersey bill. Is, for instance, we have that constraint in our current bill, and we would like for that constraint to be removed because we know that there's this whole population of thousands of people who would be served by that.
Yeah, that's a big push for right now. Something that I found out yesterday actually was we've been critiquing the Kennedy bottle bill. I kind of jumped on the project a little bit later, so I'm not entirely sure like when it was executed and whatnot. But what Jenny told me yesterday was that that bill is basically being scrapped.
I mean, you have to forgive us. I at least am not at all familiar with the history of bottle bill proposals
In New Jersey,
so
no.
There's none. So this is the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, so
what was the critique of the Kennedy bill? I'm curious.
So there's been a bunch. So big factors, and we're kind of just based off of, again, like I'm kind of coming in a little bit late to the project, but we're trying to formulate a lot of it around New York and Maine. Michigan is one of the older ones that hasn't had a whole lot of amendments. So a lot of the critique is, number one, vagueness, which, in a bill is extremely important because it really does directly affect, low income communities, things like that. And something that I noticed really quickly was from a state investment side that when it comes to the bill, there was a sort of excuse my like lingo for like legal jargon, but there's some efforts basically stating about like the enforcement, right? If they don't do these things and what happens to that person after if they don't abide by XYZ. So I know that NJEJ specifically is really trying to figure out, well, what exactly does that mean for that canner, for that person if they do that thing, right? If they go over a state line or if they go to another facility and they get like, what does that mean for that person? So I know that was a really big critique, just in terms of like what's happening to that person if they don't follow XYZ perfectly.
Okay, interesting.
And was there a handling fee that was written into that proposal?
So at the current moment, to my knowledge, we have I don't think we have a handling fee at the moment.
Okay, that's really critical.
Yeah.
Really, really critical. And one of the reasons that the Oregon model has been really challenging is even though it's 10 cents and even though it is centralized so that people returning materials don't have to sort them by distributor, those are great, but there's no handling fee, which means that there is no incentive for either on the for-profit side or on the nonprofit side to open a redemption center because there's no way you can earn money doing it to pay your expenses.
Yeah.
And a handling fee is really critical. That's, I
Mhm.
mean, that's what we would recommend.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Ours
it's
is 3.5 cents now. We're trying to get it increased to 5 cents.
Yeah, that was a big
and it's
sorry,
such
Chris.
a key piece for this thing about community level entrepreneurship. Like I think we really see a handling fee as the only way for canners to be empowered to take like a logistical responsibility in the system and start their own centers and participate in
Or
that
even
way.
non-canner or small entrepreneurs.
Well, yeah,
right?
whoever,
Yeah.
exactly.
Anybody at the local level, as opposed to, a major corporation.
Right. And though there are inefficiencies associated with that level of independence, I think it's worth it in terms of having a robust and kind of healthy ecosystem within the sector.
No, I think that's really great advice. And something that Jenny and I did talk about yesterday was, Oregon being one of the oldest, if not the oldest, if I remember correctly. Um, there's been a lot of between like lobbying from obviously the corporation side, things like that. Like there's been a lot of like people working against like amending bottle bills. So I know that because New Jersey's in a really unique situation because we don't technically have one yet. So an amendment doesn't have to be made. So it puts us, maybe a little bit behind in terms of, what we should have been doing anyway, especially when all of our neighboring states are doing it. But it also puts us at a unique position because we can formulate it so critically based off of so many different guess and check and like processes that have worked for other states. And I was actually going to tie into my second question for you guys. And I would say if there was like outside of the handling fee, if there's things from the New York bill that you guys think would be essential for New Jersey, what would you consider? Like if you guys could rewrite New York's bill tomorrow, what does that look like for you in an ideal world?
Well, I mean, there's really basic things that we advocate for, like any bottle bill, and we even have some resources we could share with you on like what
Yeah.
we think is a sort of gold standard for a bottle bill.
Okay.
And there's like an environmental piece to that, and there's a kind of labor community sensitive piece to that as well.
Mhm.
So, I mean, really basically, there needs to be a deposit that's high enough to incentivize participation and that's going to return reasonable value to the canners, to the workers who are, who rely on it. Um, there needs to be as comprehensive as possible inclusion of containers. Like right now, things like juice, coffee, wine, liquor, none of that is included in New York, and it creates a piecemeal and confusing system that just, I mean, that all that does is unreasonably limit the amount of waste that's diverted and leave a bunch of litter and confuse people, right? It's like, oh, this bottle is in the system and this bottle isn't. Like that's just
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
abrasive point.
Yeah. Unless it gets really like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then the third thing is, like we mentioned, independent redemption centers and high handling fees that allow them to sustain their operations. Like we do have a handling fee here, which is great, but it's also been neglected, just like the deposit, which means redemption centers are closing all over the place.
Yeah.
They can't afford to operate in places like Manhattan. So that value's got to be high enough. And change, be updated frequently enough to keep the system healthy and going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that, this is less kind of coalition standard, but was really Sure We Can's interest in this, as well as like our partner organizations across the country, including the one in Oregon, that we want to, and something that's not so precedented in bottle bills in America, is we want to see language that like directly and explicitly recognizes and supports canners in these bills. And I think there's different like forms that can manifest. And again, it's sort of unprecedented. So like,
Yeah.
there's not like a standard way right now to do that, at least in America.
And another thing that I'll add is that what happened in Oregon is that their bottle bill is essentially managed by a PRO. Is that a term that you're familiar, you've come across?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I just couldn't hear you.
Yeah, so their system is managed by a PRO, which is OBRC. A PRO is a producer responsibility organization.
Yep. I just had that conversation with Beyond Plastic yesterday. So this is the first time I'm learning about that like acronym specifically, but Jenny did actually bring that exact point up.
Yeah. So that's essentially putting beverage manufacturers in charge of a system that is meant to hold them accountable.
Yep.
So we advocate against PROs, generally speaking, and we feel like they should not be the key decision makers. They should be stakeholders, certainly, but to be put in charge of it would reduce transparency radically. And actually one of the resources we can send you is a case study of the Oregon bottle bill that was done a couple years ago that I think nuances the sort of challenges that they've faced so that you can take all of that into account.
No, that
There
was
are logistical and efficiency advantages to a PRO system, sort of in the abstract, and you see examples maybe in Europe where they're implemented more effectively, but they also have to be implemented with like strong, clear, explicit regulatory frameworks. And here in America, that's a high and ambitious expectation, I would say.
yeah.
So that's sort of why we choose the kind of more broader, like we don't think PROs are a good idea for US bottle bills. But there is more nuance to that. I mean, there is nuance to that conversation. But you'll see that in the case study Christine's talking about.
Okay. So I know one of the other things, just for time purposes, that we did like kind of talk a little bit about was specifically like in this drafted bill, when one of the subsections, it does say like, except as otherwise provided by this section, a dealer shall accept or return from any person an empty or returnable container of any kind, size, and brand that is sold or offered for sale by the dealer. So something that Brooke had brought up is that the language was a little bit vague, it's confusing, and she's trying to figure out like, does this mean that the dealer, they don't have to collect those materials? Do they not sell it? Will this limit the amount of materials consumers end up returning? So I was curious kind of if you guys had any takes on like the dealer side and what that, means on the New York side. If that's unclear, please let me know if I can clarify.
Just like take on structuring the system on the initiator side or like the retailer side so that it's maximally effective. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that's probably the gist of it.
Sure. Well, I mean, this is kind of like there's lots of hay being made in the conversation here in New York around the burdens imposed upon retailers, especially like smaller liquor stores or bodegas, who don't, or like bars and restaurants that don't have a lot of room to hang on to containers that they're obligated to redeem, and so this is again why we really advocate hard for handling fees, redemption center investments. We really feel like retailers shouldn't be burdened in that way. Like if there was a redemption center in like every community board in New York, or two or three, like then you would have places being able to say like, okay, we don't need to keep that stuff, just bring it to the place around the corner, they'll
Yeah.
redeem it. And redemption centers are best equipped to redeem the broadest range of material. There's not the concern about like only redeeming what's sold at any given place, which is a common thing you see, or that's in the New York law. So like if a supermarket only sells Coke, they don't sell Pepsi, they don't have to redeem your Pepsi containers.
And they don't have to redeem it. They don't have to accept materials if they are under a certain square footage.
Yeah.
In recognition of the fact that they wouldn't have space to store all those empties. So is there something in the proposed bill that makes reference to square footage for dealers?
To be honest, just off of top of my head, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
But that'd be something to look at.
Yeah, I'm sure going back and like reading it, there's probably a section on that. My I guess like change in gears is because after finding out yesterday that they might be scrapping that bill draft, I'm almost like hesitant on just like rereading it and like getting more information, because what I've been doing, at least for them, is more on like a literature review side of just taking like very basic, like here's X, Y, and Z when you break down Maine's bill, when you break down Michigan's bill, when you break down New York's bill. things like that. So from a square footage standpoint, I don't know specifically if that is listed in there.
It's an important piece, especially on the politicking side. I mean, the liquor stores and convenience stores, at least in New York, they have a strong voice in the lobbying landscape around proposals like this. So I mean, and their concerns are reasonable as well. So I think it's, as far as like passing a bill and making sure that all the stakeholders are going to be able to get what they need out of it, it's an important piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that'd be an interesting point of comparison. I actually am realizing as we're talking to you that when you finish your research and you write up your report that compares these different bottle bills, that would be super useful for us.
Yeah.
Would you
Definitely.
send it?
Yeah.
I mean, we have resources like that, and we've created some of our own comparative, sort of documents, but it might be useful for us to look at what you come up with.
Yeah, we'd love to see.
Yeah, no, that would be fine. Right now I'm kind of working off of, I'll do like a really quick screen share and then I have one more question for you guys. I'm working off of a really loosely tied compare and contrast sheet like this that we've been kind of doing for the last couple weeks. And
Great.
I have probably about 7 others about like regulatory towards us. And then yesterday Jenny was telling me to basically stop reworking the wheel because it already exists.
Great.
So I didn't know that, but
Where did you find that doc?
this she sent these directly to me. I actually have a bunch of resources, and I was gonna do a big resource I speak with one more person on Monday. So got a big CRI guide. I got this like the bottle bill guide, just like basics like XYZ.
Yeah.
That's you guys. There's one more thing. This was the big one. Just kind of like the briefings and updates, and then this is you guys again. Maybe my apps or yeah, this was the she said this was like actually something she wrote for CRI back in the day of why the 10-cent incentive is crucial. And I haven't actually dove into it yet because I just got it yesterday, but I think this is going to answer a lot of my questions.
Oh, cool. We'd love to. Would you share that with me?
Absolutely, yeah. I can put it in the
Thank you.
chat right now.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah.
That was a while ago, 2006.
Yeah. And that's kind of, and the craziest thing is that when this was written, so Hawaii was the last state so far to basically pass a bill since then.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So one more question for everybody, and I think this one, I'm kind of going a little bit loose here, but I think this one's actually really relevant for you guys. And do you guys have like any data on how closely people are following the law and like what that's contributing to their society, but like the economics, the structure, like the social system of New York as a whole, maybe, for the people who are specifically following this?
Are you talking about whether or not beverage distributors, like the multinationals, whether they're following the law, whether the retailers are following the law, whether
When Brooke wrote the question, she did put like when the law is broken, is this done primarily by manufacturers, distributors, or by individuals? I would have to imagine the people who don't want this to happen are the ones cutting corners. But I'm just curious if you guys actually have like any case studies, data, anything that would kind of support that claim.
There's basically no data on fraud.
Okay.
And this is part of the issue in the lobbying is that there's lots and lots of rhetoric around it, but basically no evidence. So Manhattan Beer, for example, that distributes here in New York claims they lose millions and millions a year to bottle fraud.
Okay.
They don't say where, they don't say by whom, they don't say what. So,
right.
And we've experienced like sketchy audits from distributors for sure.
We've experienced huge delay. You should come to our lot right now and you would see evidence of this.
Yes.
We experienced huge delays in compliance by the distributors to come and pick up the materials that we have sorted and ready for them.
Yeah.
And so that's a major issue.
And a key piece of this is that the regulatory agency that has the responsibility to oversee the law, which in New York is the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Yep. I was just gonna get there.
Is basically has no capacity at all to do so. I mean, not even just the bottle law, but there's other environmental laws here in New York, like the plastic bag ban, stuff like that, that they just
Yeah.
literally do not enforce.
Yeah.
So you'd think that they would be the ones tracking this kind of thing, but they're not doing it. So a key piece, I think, in conceiving and constructing legislation is making sure that there's an oversight and regulatory, like a transparency framework
Yeah.
that would allow some of this data to actually be created.
Exactly. So yeah, putting in the law some language around data collection and research, right, to be able to get data points that are going to be key for understanding how well the system is actually working.
We're trying to, Sure We Can is pushing right now within the coalition to try to propose a shared platform that the state can manage, where like invoices and payments and everything could be posted, so that there would just be one place where all this stuff would be stored and tracked, and you could pull up I mean, it would be amazing to see all that too,
Yeah.
like all the data, see where it moves and how it's happening. Because there's so much going on, but yeah, it's all murky and mysterious.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think that kind of just goes directly to the people lobbying against it. And the resource, I think Jenny was telling me yesterday that at one point they were lobbying them 9 times to 1, at one point. So it's, the
I'm
reason
not sure what
why,
you mean.
What do you mean?
the people like working against not like amending a bill, getting a bill passed, either on, the Coke and Pepsi side or whoever it is. When they do that and they're lobbying against it, they're out doing it. I don't know what the correct again terminology is, but they're out doing it by almost 9 times to the people like you guys on your
Well, they're
side.
certainly much better resource than we are.
Absolutely.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to kind of leave it if you guys like. I think that is, this has been really lovely and definitely informative. And I'm actually in the New York area, when I work and stuff. So I would love to actually schedule something to maybe come like see the center and stuff, because I've never actually been to one, and I'm genuinely curious. I've put in a lot of time to the project, so I'll coordinate with you guys about that. Obviously,
Love to have you.
What was that?
We'd love to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And really just, 4 months left, like any final remarks, and, this is going to be recorded. I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to bring it to Brooke and Chris, and anything else you guys really, think about in terms of bottle bills that comes to mind.
I mean, I guess just like it's worth the fight. Bottle bills are effective. They work. So keep at it and it'll happen. Like it has in other states. Also that it's easy to kind of like get distracted, I think, in this conversation by like fraud, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a narrative that gets a lot of play in the conversation, but it doesn't really help anything except like paralyze the conversation and keep anything from happening, right? Which is of course the goal in the case of distributors and people who want to stop it. But there's a few of these red herrings. I mean, I think a lot of these, I think bottle bills are effective partly because they're simple, elegant systems, and that's part of what we're advocating for in New York, is like maintaining a degree of simplicity that supports the system's effectiveness and people using it, right? Like it has to be useful and accessible, and part of that is its simplicity and comprehensiveness.
Yeah. Equity.
So yeah. So I just to keep those things in mind as you compare and notice like where, like for example, where in Oregon, where certain things that seem simple maybe end up being more complex, like a PRO structure. So it's meant to consolidate and simplify and make it efficient, but it also makes it more cumbersome just to operate.
Yeah. And it also consolidates power up at the top.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all the money flows up.
Yeah. So we want to see a system where like anybody could just get started running a redemption center, like where it's accessible from all angles. It's transparent. It's easy to use for canners. It's easy to use for redemption operators. It's easy to use for distributors. And it'll work.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for that. Anything on your end, Christine?
I guess the one thing to maybe be attentive to as you are contributing to crafting the bill is municipal recycling contracts. We really have felt pressure on our community from the DSNY, the Department of Sanitation, because of the contract that they have with Sims Recycling. And my understanding is that in New Jersey, Sims is also the contractor in some cities currently. I
Okay.
think that's the case.
That does sound correct.
Yeah. And so you just want to keep that on your radar in terms of what are the terms of those contracts between the city and the municipal contractor hired to manage recycling, because they're going to want all of the stuff that's in the bottle bill, because those are good, clean recyclables. So you want to make sure that those contracts, I don't, it's a little bit out of your hands, but you want to kind of keep it on your radar as something that's going to impact the effectiveness of the bottle bill.
Amazing.
And the politics and getting it moved.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want it to cut off before I have the chance to say goodbye. I have to upgrade the student version, but thank you guys for your time. I genuinely appreciate it. I will be sending a recap email and absolutely will be sharing the final project with you. And I would love to come visit the center. So thank you for your time. I genuinely appreciate it. And I'm going to take all this great stuff back to Chris and Brooke.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks, Alexandria.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.